We'll see you again very soon.
Thanks.
Now, there are nearly 1.5 million people in England, Scotland and Wales claiming carers' allowance. The amount they receive is just under £82 a week.
Well, today, MPs will debate increasing the allowance in line with the national living wage, as carers face growing demands on their finances amid the cost of living crisis. Abby Smitten has been speaking to some of those affected.
Every Monday morning, Northamptonshire Carers Choir meets to rehearse. For many of the unpaid carers here, it's their only break from the constant demands of supporting a loved one.
Good girl, thank you.
Sarah cares for her daughter Phoebe. Phoebe's 23 and has a rare genetic disorder, Pitt-Hopkins syndrome.
There is a relentlessness to caring. There is just this feeling that I'm doing this day in, day out, day in, day out.
She had to give up work to care for Phoebe full-time.
I felt like we had no choice. I couldn't balance everything. But yeah, it was scary. It was scary thinking about the money. You know, I still wanted to achieve and strive and do stuff for myself. So it was a tricky one. It was very difficult.
It may be tough going. Sarah is one of more than 1.4 million people in England, Wales and Scotland who claim carers' allowance. Carers can earn just under £82 each week if they spend at least 35 hours a week caring for someone.
It's pennies really in comparison. It doesn't equal because the caring role can be so sporadic and it's across the whole day and night. It's just a drop in the ocean.
Victoria works for Northamptonshire Carers. She dropped everything to care for her dad until he passed away last year. She says claiming carers' allowance was a battle. She'd spend hours on the phone to the Department for Work and Pensions, desperately trying to get support.
Not that you can't put a value on caring for someone, but it doesn't pay the bills, it doesn't help really. And it's a very cold, standard process which is followed. The letters are very sharp, and when you're feeling really low, it doesn't help at all. It doesn't help.
Sarah cares for her mum, her brother and 2 children. She receives her carers' allowance payments each week, but they don't go far.
It goes straight in my car. Last week I had 4 appointments between my mum and my brother. I had 4 medical appointments, and that's on top of taking my children out and doing things. So it doesn't go very far with fuel prices and distances and everything.
Campaigners say the carers' allowance system is too confusing. Neil's cared for his partner David since he was diagnosed with a rare degenerative eye condition.
It is like a bereavement when you lose your eyesight, but now I've learned to cope the best I can, haven't I?
Yeah.
You don't have a choice really, do you?
I'm there, just back him up and everything and make sure he's okay. Yeah.
Last year, Neil's carers' allowance was abruptly stopped when he started claiming his state pension. Under the government's rules, carers aren't entitled to both payments at the same time.
It's quite annoyed, actually. It's quite annoyed. His disability is bad enough for me to get it before I was 66. It should still be the same after, the day after I was 66, because they stopped it straight away.
It is a 24-hour job. It is constantly running around sorting out and organising the phone calls, the letters. It's just everything.
Carers will head to Parliament today to call for changes to carers' allowance, including raising minimum payments and providing additional support for people earning the state pension.
It's like I'm not valued. I feel like what I do isn't valued.
The Department for Work and Pensions says they recognise the role of unpaid carers and are committed to helping them financially.
I would also love to have the assurance that if there was an emergency, we would be looked after.
You gotta sing. Abby Smitten reporting there. We know this is an issue that affects so many families across the country. We're joined now by Helen Walker, who's Chief Executive at Carers UK. Morning, Helen. And joining us from Essex is Christy Michael, who is a carer for her mum. Hi, morning, Christy. I know you've been looking after your mum for some years, haven't you? How's she doing at the moment?
She's actually in hospital with sepsis at the moment, so it's been a really stressful time.
I'm sorry to hear that. Stressful for her, but stress for you as well. And it is, I guess, every day, whether she's in hospital or at home.
Exactly. It's even when she's in hospital, it's the worry about if she's being looked after well. The communication between myself and the staff there is just non-existent. So trying to get through to the doctors and the nurses for updates, they just don't pick the phone up. They're too busy. So the stress has been really bad.
Christy, you've been doing this now for a long time, supporting your mum. How much support do you feel you get?
I don't think I get any support. I wish that I did, but I just think that there's a lack of finance, and they're understaffed everywhere, social care, the NHS. I wish that I had more support, because this role it takes a toll on your mental health and your physical health.
Go on, in what way?
It wears you down, it's draining, it's upsetting. Watching your parent deteriorate you can't explain it. But my mental health has really worsened over the years. I've got depression and anxiety, insomnia, I have panic attacks. It's horrible.
The carer's allowance is at a rate of £81.90 a week. Yeah. How does that help you?
It doesn't. I barely scrape by. I mean, that is the absolute minimum that anyone should get. It doesn't barely cover shopping. I mean, it doesn't cover shopping. It doesn't cover the bills. I'm in arrears. I feel like I'm constantly trying to catch up. And that extra stress is just something that carers do not need.
Helen, how familiar is this story to you?
Well, unfortunately, it's a very familiar story. Carers are finding themselves in real financial trouble right now, and carers' allowance simply isn't enough.
And sometimes not there at all.
Oh, sometimes not there at all. So if you get a pension, it drops off. If you earn too much money, it drops off. So but £81.90 is just embarrassing. It's awful.
You're saying that it suddenly drops off.
Yeah.
I think one thing that will surprise a lot of people watching this morning is that if you go a penny over the threshold, you then lose all of that allowance.
That's correct. So the threshold is £151 after tax and national insurance. If you go just a penny over that, you lose all of the £81.90. And that can accumulate because often the DWP system doesn't pick that up. The onus is on the carer to tell DWP that, for example, they may have got a pay rise, they may have done an extra hour overtime, they don't realise they've gone over it, they've worked it out over a month instead of over a week. They then lose all of that. That then accumulates. They have to then pay it back. So they're being criminalised effectively.
And we're hearing stories of people having to pay back large amounts of money they just can't possibly afford.
Thousands and thousands of pounds, which have accumulated over, say, 3 or 4 years. They then have to pay it back over, 10 years, maybe £20 a week. And if you're on carer's allowance, by definition, you are in the lowest possible income. So that's it. That's deeply, deeply unfair. You're being penalised for caring.
And Christy, I imagine that this is just yet another thing for you to worry about.
Yes, it is. It just feels like it's one thing after another. And instead of giving us an increase so that we're at least not struggling, you feel like they're going to just take things away. It's actually unbelievable. It feels demeaning. It feels insulting, and you just feel like you're not seen.
Christy, the Department for Work and Pensions have told us that they've increased the care allowance by almost £1,500 since 2010, and they say they're committed to fairness in the welfare system. What do you say to them?
I say that is not enough. 2010 was a very long time ago. We were in a very different financial world at that point. Everything's increasing constantly, and we're just not given enough to cover all of the new expenses. So they need to think hard about how much us as carers are actually saving them as a government. They need to think about us, because I said before in the manifesto from Carers UK that if they don't look after carers, we are going to need carers ourselves, and that will cost them a lot more in the long run.
Helen, I would really like to read this email that we've had just in a few moments ago from Angela, who says, This: I have a son with Down syndrome and several health issues. I did receive carer's allowance when I left my teaching job, but on reaching state pension age, this has been withdrawn. The irony is, as he's got older, he's developed Alzheimer's, and actually his care is quite intensive, more intensive than ever before. We still do the same or even a harder job. I hasten to add, I find it an absolute privilege to be my son's carer and help to make his life more fulfilling. This is the thing, isn't it? Very often it doesn't get easier, it gets harder.
That's right, and it's another cliff edge. So you hit pension age and your carer's allowance just stops. So I think what we're calling for at Carers UK is a fundamental review of carer's allowance. It's not just the benefit itself, it's all the things around it and where it drops off, where it's unacceptable. I mean, the government wants people to work, and yet if they work more than their, that £1, then suddenly they lose their benefits. So they're being penalised for working. So even if they can juggle work and care, or they reach pensionable age, then they need some level of support. So we need a fundamental review of that benefit system.
I suppose the reality as well for government, future governments, is that times are tough financially and there isn't much money to go around. What do you say to the politicians about the importance of investing in this when they've got so many other difficult choices to make?
I'd reiterate Christie's point. I mean, carers save the state £162 billion a year. If they go down, that's what the state is going to have to pay. That's the equivalent to a second NHS. So it's about government priorities. We know that we've got an ageing population. We've got people living longer with more complex illnesses. So this is only going to become a bigger issue, and it needs sorting out now.
So, Christy, if you weren't there to care for your mum, what would happen to her?
I actually don't know. She'd probably end up in a care home, and that's something that I just wouldn't want for her. I just wouldn't. And she raised me as a single parent. She worked 2 jobs to keep a roof over my head and food on the table. So it's the least I can do. So without me here, I just don't know what would happen. And I would worry as well.
Christy, you can't be in London for this debate in Parliament today, but if you were in front of all these politicians, if they gave you the microphone, we've given you the microphone now, they might be watching, what's your message to them?
I would say to them that this can happen to anyone. You could become a carer today. You could become a carer tomorrow. You could become a carer in the next hour to someone that you love the most in this world. And to do that, you would need the support of the government. And without that, you would understand what struggle really is. You need to look after us. We look after our family. You need to help support us.
Powerful words, Christy. Thank you so much for talking to us today, and all the best to your mum. I hope she gets well and back to you very soon. Thank you. And Helen,
thank you so much.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. And thank you for all your emails on this subject. I know a lot of you have been in touch with us this morning.